Hello, English learners. Welcome back to English Practice with Julia. I'm Julia, and I'll be your host today. If you're new here, I'm really happy you decided to spend some time learning English with me today. On this channel, we share a new English learning lesson every single day. And each lesson is designed to help you improve your English step by step, slowly, naturally, and with confidence. In today's episode, we're going to work on something that every English learner wants, and that is English fluency, the ability to speak smoothly, understand naturally, and express your thoughts clearly in real conversations. But today's lesson will not be just about listening. You're also going to practice thinking and writing in English. So yes, before we go any further, please keep a pen and paper close to you, because during this lesson, I will give you small practice moments, short exercises, and simple situations where you can pause, think, and write your own English sentences. Our topic today is 15 steps that can help you improve your English fluency in daily life. These are not complicated academic techniques. They are simple habits. Small changes in the way you practice, listen, speak, and think in English every day. Throughout this lesson, I will share real-life examples, small situations you might experience in daily life, and practical exercises that help your brain become more comfortable with English. You'll practice forming sentences, reacting to situations, and expressing ideas more naturally. Sometimes learners think fluency means speaking very fast, but real fluency is something different. Real fluency means your mind can understand English comfortably. Your thoughts can move smoothly into English words, and you are relaxed when you communicate. So during this lesson, we're going to train your brain to move closer to that feeling, step by step, sentence by sentence, moment by moment. And before we begin, if you enjoy calm and practical English lessons like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you never miss a new lesson, because practicing a little every day can make a huge difference in your English journey. All right, take a slow breath, relax your mind, keep your pen and paper ready, and let's begin improving your English fluency together. Improving your English fluency does not happen in one big moment. It happens through many small moments that slowly change the way your brain uses the language. Many learners believe fluency is something mysterious, something only talented people can achieve. But the truth is much simpler than that. Fluency grows when you give your brain regular chances to hear English, think in English, and express ideas in English in natural situations. The first thing you need to understand is that fluency is not only about grammar or vocabulary, it is about comfort. When your brain feels comfortable with English, sentences begin to appear more naturally, words come faster, and conversations start to feel less stressful. So in this lesson, we are going to slowly train that comfort, little by little, with simple habits that fit into daily life. One helpful step toward fluency is learning to notice English around you during the day. Many learners only practice English during a study session, maybe for 30 minutes, and then they completely disconnect from the language for the rest of the day. But fluency improves faster as English becomes a small part of your normal routine. For example, imagine you wake up in the morning and you quietly describe your actions in English. You might say something simple in your mind like, I'm waking up now. I need to get out of bed. I'm opening the window. The weather looks nice today. These sentences are very simple, but they activate your English thinking. Now take a small pause and try a quick exercise. Imagine your morning routine for a moment. Think about the first thing you usually do after waking up. Now write 1 or 2 English sentences describing that action. You might write something like, I brush my teeth and drink a glass of water, or I check my phone and read messages. There is no need for perfect grammar. The goal is simply to let your brain express daily actions in English. When learners practice like this, something interesting begins to happen. Your brain slowly builds connections between real life and English words. Instead of translating everything from your native language, your mind begins to recognize situations directly in English. Another powerful step toward fluency is learning to speak slowly and clearly instead of trying to speak fast. Many learners feel pressure to speak quickly because they think that is what fluent speakers do. But speed is not the real goal. Clarity is the real goal. When you speak slowly, your brain has time to choose the right words. Your pronunciation becomes clearer, and your confidence grows. Now, fluent speakers often sound smooth not because they speak fast, but because they speak comfortably and naturally. Let's try another small practice moment together. Imagine you are meeting a friend in the morning, and they ask you a simple question. How is your day starting? Take a moment and write a short response in English. Something like, my day is starting well. I had breakfast and now I'm getting ready for work. Or, it's a quiet morning. I'm planning my tasks for the day. Try to make the sentence feel natural and relaxed. This kind of small speaking practice helps your brain prepare for real conversations. Even if you are writing the sentences now, your brain is learning the patterns of spoken English. Another important step toward fluency is listening carefully to natural English. Listening trains your brain to recognize rhythm, tone, and sentence flow. The more you hear English used naturally, the easier it becomes to understand conversations and respond comfortably. For an example, imagine you are listening to a short conversation between 2 coworkers. One person says, "Did you finish the report?" And the other replies, "Almost. I just need another hour to check a few details." When you hear conversations like this, your brain learns how English moves in real communication. Now let's do a small observation exercise. Imagine you hear someone say, "I just need a few minutes." What do you think this person means? They probably mean they are almost finished with something, and they only need a short amount of time to complete it. Try writing your own sentence using the phrase "a few minutes." For example, "Give me a few minutes and I'll be ready." Or, "I need a few minutes to organize my notes." Exercises like this help your brain notice useful phrases that appear again and again in everyday English. These phrases are important because fluent communication often depends on familiar expressions, not just individual words. Another step toward fluency is building the habit of asking yourself simple questions in English. When you ask questions, your brain naturally starts searching for answers, and that creates stronger language connections. For example, you might ask yourself questions like, what am I doing right now? What is my plan for today? What did I learn yesterday? Then you answer those questions with short English sentences. Let's try this together. Pause for a moment and answer this question in English. What is something you plan to do later today? Write 1 or 2 sentences about it. For example, later today I will study English for 30 minutes. Or I will call my friend and talk about our weekend plans. This simple question and answer habit trains your brain to create English responses more naturally. Over time, it becomes easier to speak because your mind becomes familiar with forming ideas in English. Another helpful idea is learning to accept small mistakes during practice. Many learners stop themselves from speaking because they are afraid of saying something incorrectly, but mistakes are actually part of the learning process. Think about children learning their first language. They make many small mistakes while speaking, but those mistakes help them improve. The same thing happens when learning English. Each small mistake teaches your brain something new. So during today's lesson, allow yourself to experiment with English. Try writing sentences. Try speaking them quietly. And do not worry. What about perfection? Fluency grows when you allow yourself to practice freely. Let's do another small exercise. Imagine someone asks you this question. Why are you learning English? Take a moment to answer honestly. Maybe your answer is something like, I want to travel and communicate with people. Or, I want better career opportunities. Or, I enjoy learning new languages. Write your answer in 1 or 2 sentences. Now, read your sentence slowly. Notice how the words feel when you say them. When you repeat your own sentences, your brain begins to remember those patterns more easily. One more helpful habit is describing your surroundings in English. This exercise trains your observation skills and vocabulary at the same time. Look around the room you are sitting in. Notice objects, colors, or sounds. Now try writing 2 simple sentences describing what you see. You might write, there is a window beside my desk. Or, my notebook is open and I'm writing practice sentences. This exercise may seem simple, but it helps your brain connect real environments with English language structures. Over time, these small exercises begin to build a strong foundation for fluency. Because fluency is not created by memorizing thousands of isolated words. It grows from repeated interaction with meaningful English sentences. So as we continue through this lesson, keep your pen and paper ready. Allow your mind to explore ideas. And remember that every small sentence you write or say is a step towards stronger English communication. The journey to fluency is not about rushing forward. It is about moving steadily, practicing daily, and allowing your brain to become comfortable with the language little by little. And as you continue practicing with me, you will begin to notice that English no longer feels like a difficult subject. Instead, it begins to feel like a natural tool you can use to express your thoughts and experiences. So stay relaxed, stay curious, and keep practicing with me, because the more moments you spend interacting with English, the closer you move toward real fluency. As you continue developing your English fluency, it is helpful to remember that fluency grows when English becomes connected to real experiences, not only textbooks or exercises. When you connect language with daily life situations, your brain begins to treat English as a natural communication tool instead of something that exists only during study time. One powerful step that many successful learners follow is building a habit of thinking in English during simple everyday moments. You do not need a classroom for this. You only need awareness. Imagine you are walking somewhere, maybe going to work, school, or the store. Instead of letting your thoughts remain in your native language, try gently shifting your thinking into English. For example, while walking, you might quietly think, "The weather feels cool today. I should bring a jacket tomorrow. There are many people on the street this morning." These thoughts may seem very simple, but they activate the language centers in your brain. Now take a moment for a short practice exercise. Think about the place where you usually study English. Maybe your desk, your room, or a quiet corner in your house. Write 2 sentences. Are describing that place in English. You might write something like, "My study space is small but comfortable." Or, "I like studying near the window because the light is bright." Try to write the sentences slowly and clearly. This small activity teaches your brain something very important. It shows your mind that English can describe your real environment, not just imaginary situations in a lesson. Another step toward fluency is learning to expand simple sentences into slightly longer ideas. Many learners know basic sentences like, "I like coffee," or "I study English." But fluency improves when you practice adding small details. For example, instead of saying only "I like coffee," you can expand the idea. "I like drinking coffee in the morning because it helps me feel more awake." Suddenly, your sentence becomes more expressive and natural. Let's practice this together. Write a simple sentence first, something like, "I watch movies." Now try expanding it with more information. Perhaps, "I watch movies in the evening because it helps me relax after a long day." Notice how the sentence becomes more interesting and more natural for conversation. Practicing expansion like this trains your brain to build richer sentences without feeling overwhelmed. You start with a simple idea, then slowly add details. Another helpful fluency habit is repeating useful phrases out loud. Repetition strengthens memory. And hearing your own voice speaking English helps your brain become comfortable with the sound of the language. For example, imagine you are practicing the phrase, "I'm working on improving my English." Say it slowly, then repeat it again, perhaps 3 times. Notice how the rhythm of the sentence begins to feel smoother each time you repeat it. Now try writing your own sentence using the phrase "working on." You might write something like, "I'm working on improving my pronunciation," or "I'm working on speaking more confidently." When you read your sentence aloud, your brain practices both speaking and listening at the same time. Another step that improves fluency is learning to tell short personal stories in English. Stories help your brain organize language in a natural flow. When you describe events that happened in your life, you practice using verbs, time expressions, joy and emotions all together. Let's try a gentle storytelling exercise. Think about something simple that happened yesterday. Maybe you cooked a meal, met a friend, or studied English. Write 3 sentences describing that experience. For example, yesterday evening I practiced English for 30 minutes. I watched a short lesson and repeated some phrases. After that, I felt more confident speaking. Notice how these sentences connect naturally. When you practice storytelling like this, you are training the same skills needed for real conversations, because conversations often involve sharing small experiences from daily life. Another step that helps fluency grow is listening carefully to how native speakers connect ideas. In natural English, sentences often flow together smoothly. Instead of stopping after every sentence, speakers connect thoughts with words like so, because, then, or but. For example, someone might say, I wanted to go for a walk, but it started raining. Or I finished my work early, so I decided to read a book. These small connecting words help conversations feel smooth and natural. Now take a small pause and try a connection exercise. Write 2 short sentences about your day. Then combine them using the word because. For example, I woke up early because I had a meeting, or I studied English because I want to speak more confidently. This practice helps your brain learn how ideas link together in natural speech. Another important step toward fluency is learning to describe feelings and opinions. Many conversations include emotional expressions. When you can explain how you feel or what you think, communication becomes more meaningful. For example, you might say, I feel excited about learning English, or I think practicing every day is very helpful. These sentences allow you to share personal thoughts. Let's practice this together. Think about your English learning journey. How do you feel about it today? Write 2 sentences expressing your feelings. Perhaps you write, I feel motivated to keep improving. Or, sometimes learning English feels challenging, but I enjoy the process. Reading these sentences helps your brain connect language with personal emotions. Another helpful habit is noticing useful phrases that appear again and again in conversations. Instead of memorizing long lists of random words, focus on short phrases that people use frequently. For example, phrases like, that makes sense, I see what you mean, or let me think about that, appear often in conversations. When you learn these phrases as complete units, how your brain can use them quickly during communication. Now try writing 1 short dialogue line using the phrase I see. For example, I see what you mean, or I see why that is important. When you practice phrases like this, or you prepare yourself for real conversations where quick responses are needed. Another step that builds fluency is practicing patience with your own progress. Language learning is a gradual journey. Some days you may feel very confident. Other days you may feel slower. And that is completely normal. Think of fluency like building a path through a forest. Every time you practice English, you walk a little farther along that path. At first, the path may feel unclear, but the more you walk it, the easier it becomes to follow. Let's finish this section with a final short writing exercise. Imagine a friend asks you, How are you improving your English these days? Write 2 or 3 sentences explaining your routine. For example, I practice English every morning for 20 minutes. I listen to lessons and repeat useful phrases. I also try to think in English during the day. Notice how this answer sounds like a natural conversation response. Each small exercise you complete strengthens your confidence, and confidence is one of the most important ingredients of fluency. So continue practicing slowly. Allow your brain to absorb the rhythm of English. And remember that every sentence you create brings you closer to speaking comfortably and naturally. Stay patient, stay curious, and keep moving forward step by step, because fluency is not built in a single moment. It grows through thousands of small interactions with the language. And the more you interact with English in your daily life, the more natural it will begin to feel. As your journey toward English fluency continues, it becomes important to develop a deeper connection with the language through daily repetition and observation. Fluency is not only built by studying rules, it is built by living with the language, by letting English appear naturally during your daily activities, your thoughts, and your small conversations. Many learners reach a moment where they understand a lot of English but still feel nervous when speaking. This happens because understanding and producing language are 2 different skills. Listening and reading help you recognize English, but speaking and writing help you create English. And fluency grows stronger when these 2 skills begin to work together. One simple step that can help you build this connection is practicing short spoken reflections about your day. This means taking a few quiet moments to describe what is happening around you or what you are planning to do. You can do this while walking, cooking, or sitting quietly with a notebook. For example, you might say softly to yourself, I'm preparing my breakfast right now. I'm making tea and toast. After this, I will start studying. These small spoken reflections help your brain practice building sentences without pressure. Now pause for a short exercise. Think about what you did earlier today. Perhaps something simple, like eating breakfast, traveling somewhere, or answering messages. Write 2 or 3 sentences describing that moment in English. You might write, this morning I checked my messages and then I made breakfast. After that, I prepared my notes for studying. Notice how these sentences tell a small story. Storytelling is one of the most natural ways humans communicate. And when you practice telling even very small stories in English, your fluency grows because your brain begins organizing ideas in a logical flow. Another powerful habit for improving fluency is learning to slow down your thinking when speaking English. Many learners feel pressure to answer quickly, but fluent communication is not about speed. It is about clarity and comfort. Imagine someone asks you a question like, what do you usually do in the evening? Instead of rushing to answer, take a small breath and calmly organize your thoughts. Then respond slowly, perhaps saying, in the evening, I usually relax for a while. Sometimes I watch a short video, and then I spend some time practicing English. Notice how the response feels relaxed and natural. Let's practice this idea together. Write an answer to the question. What is one activity that helps you relax? Your sentence might look like, listening to music helps me relax after a long day. Or, taking a short walk in the evening helps me feel calm. When you write and then read your answer, slowly, you train your brain to express thoughts clearly without rushing. Another step that improves fluency is learning to notice patterns in English sentences. Instead of memorizing isolated words, try noticing how sentences are built. For example, you might hear sentences like, I enjoy learning new things. I enjoy meeting new people. I enjoy practicing English. Here you can see a pattern. I enjoy followed by an activity. When you recognize patterns like this, your brain can easily create new sentences using the same structure. For example, I enjoy reading books, or I enjoy exploring new ideas. This kind of pattern awareness helps your speech become faster and more natural. Now try a small practice moment. Write 2 sentences using the phrase I enjoy, but describe different activities, perhaps something you enjoy doing in the morning and something you enjoy doing in the evening. When you repeat the same pattern with different ideas, your brain begins to store that structure more deeply. Another helpful step is learning to ask yourself reflective questions in English. These questions encourage your brain to produce language actively instead of only receiving information. For example, ask yourself, what motivates me to learn English? Then answer the question honestly in 2 or 3 sentences. Perhaps you write, learning English allows me to communicate with people from different countries. It also helps me access more information and opportunities. When you express personal motivations, the language becomes more meaningful and easier to remember. Another step toward fluency is developing confidence when expressing opinions. In real conversations, people often share what they think about different topics. When you practice expressing opinions in English, your communication becomes richer and more natural. For example, you might say, I think daily practice is the most important part of learning English. Or, in my opinion, listening to real conversations helps learners improve faster. These opinion phrases help you participate actively in discussions. Let's practice this together. Write 1 sentence beginning with I think about learning English, and another sentence beginning with in my opinion, describing something you believe about language learning. When you read these sentences aloud, your brain practices sharing ideas clearly. Another important habit is learning to paraphrase ideas. Paraphrasing means we're expressing the same idea using slightly different words. This skill is extremely useful when speaking English because sometimes the exact word you want may not come immediately. For example, if you cannot remember the word exhausted, you might say very tired. If you forget the word purchase, you can say buy. Paraphrasing keeps the conversation moving smoothly. Now try a small exercise. Write a sentence using the word happy. Then write another sentence expressing the same feeling but using different words. Perhaps I feel very glad today. Or I'm feeling cheerful this morning. This exercise helps your brain become flexible when communicating. Another step that strengthens fluency is learning to describe future plans. Conversations often involve talking about what we intend to do later. When you practice describing future plans, you prepare yourself for everyday communication. For example, you might say, Later today, I plan to review some English vocabulary. Or tomorrow, I will spend time practicing speaking. These simple future expressions appear often in daily conversations. Take a moment now and write 2 sentences about something you plan to do tomorrow. It could be anything: studying, working, meeting a friend, or relaxing at home. Try writing your sentences slowly and clearly. When you practice describing future actions, your brain becomes comfortable moving between past, present, and future ideas in English. Another valuable habit is listening carefully to your own voice when you speak English. Many learners practice silently, but speaking aloud helps improve pronunciation and rhythm. When you read your sentences out loud, you hear how the words connect. You notice where your voice rises or falls, and you begin developing a natural speaking rhythm. Let's try a quick speaking moment. Look at the sentence you wrote about tomorrow. Now read it slowly out loud. Pay attention to how the sentence flows. If it feels difficult, repeat it again gently. Repetition helps your mouth and brain coordinate the sounds of English. Another step toward fluency is celebrating small improvements. Language learning can sometimes feel slow, but every new phrase you learn, every sentence you create, and every moment you understand English more clearly is progress. Think about your English journey so far. Perhaps you understand more than you did a few months ago. Perhaps you can express ideas that once felt difficult. Recognizing this progress builds confidence and motivation. Now write 1 sentence describing something that has improved in your English. For example, I can understand spoken English more easily now. Or, I feel more confident forming sentences. This reflection reminds you that improvement is happening. Fluency grows not from perfection, but from continuous interaction with the language. Every sentence you create, every idea you express, and every phrase you repeat strengthens your ability to communicate. So as we continue, all practicing together, remember that fluency is built through patience, curiosity, and daily engagement with English. Allow yourself to explore ideas, express thoughts, and experiment with sentences. Because every small step you take is shaping a stronger connection with the language. Stay relaxed, stay open to learning, and keep practicing with confidence. Because your fluency is growing with every moment you spend interacting with English. As you continue strengthening your English fluency, and it becomes helpful to focus on building natural speaking habits that fit easily into everyday life. Fluency grows faster when practice feels simple and regular instead of difficult and stressful. When English becomes part of your normal thinking process, your mind begins to react to situations more naturally in the language. One important step that many learners discover is the habit of describing actions while they are happening. This is a simple but powerful technique because it connects language directly with real activities. Instead of only studying vocabulary lists, you begin using English to describe real moments in your life. For example, imagine you are preparing a meal in your kitchen. While doing this, you might quietly say to yourself, I'm cutting the vegetables now. I'm heating the pan. I'm adding some salt. These small descriptions help your brain associate English words with physical actions. Now take a moment for a short exercise. Think about one activity you often do during the day. Maybe making coffee, organizing your desk, or checking your phone. Write 2 or 3 sentences describing that activity as if you are doing it right now. For example, I'm opening my notebook and writing. Ear practice sentences. Or, I'm preparing a cup of tea before I start studying. When you read these sentences aloud, your brain practices forming natural present moment expressions. Another helpful step toward fluency is building the habit of reacting to situations in English. In real conversations, people often respond quickly to what is happening around them. Practicing these reactions helps your brain become comfortable expressing spontaneous thoughts. For example, imagine someone tells you, "The meeting has been moved to tomorrow." A natural response might be, "Oh, that's good to know." Or, "Thanks for telling me." These small reaction phrases appear constantly in everyday conversations. Let's try a short practice moment. Imagine a friend tells you, "I finally finished my project." Write a short response in English, maybe something like, "That's great news," or "You must feel relieved." Reading your response slowly helps your brain prepare for similar real-life interactions. Another step that strengthens fluency is learning to talk about your preferences and choices. In daily life, we often explain what we like, what we prefer, or what we enjoy doing. Practicing these expressions allows your conversations to feel more natural and personal. For example, you might say, "I prefer studying English in the morning because my mind feels fresh." Or, "I like listening to English lessons while walking." These sentences show how personal preferences can become part of natural communication. Now, take a pause and write 2 sentences about your own preferences. You could write, "I prefer quiet places when I study." Or, "I like practicing English with short daily exercises." Notice how your sentences reflect your real experiences. Another helpful step toward why fluency is learning to explain reasons. Conversations often include explanations about why we do something or why we think a certain way. When you practice giving reasons, your speech becomes more detailed and meaningful. For example, we imagine someone asks you, "Why are you practicing English today?" You might respond, "I'm practicing today because I want to improve my speaking confidence." Or, "I'm studying because I want to communicate with people from different countries." These explanations help conversations develop naturally. Now try writing one sentence beginning with "because," describing your reason for learning English. For example, "I practice English every day because it helps me reach my goals." When you read the I or sentence slowly, Zhao, you strengthen the connection between your motivation and the language you are learning. Another powerful fluency habit is learning to summarize information in simple English. Summarizing means explaining something briefly using your own words. This skill is useful in conversations when you want to share information clearly. Imagine you watched a short video about travel. You might summarize it by saying, "The video explained how travelers can plan their trips carefully and enjoy new experiences." This kind of summary helps your brain organize information into clear sentences. Let's practice this idea. Think about something you learned recently, maybe a lesson, a conversation, or an interesting idea. Write 2 sentences summarizing what you learned. For example, I learned that practicing English a little every day helps improve fluency. Or, I discovered that listening carefully can improve pronunciation. These sentences show how summarizing helps reinforce an understanding. Another step toward fluency is becoming comfortable with pauses while speaking. Many learners worry about small pauses in conversation, but pauses are actually natural. Even fluent speakers pause briefly to organize their thoughts. Instead of seeing pauses as a problem, you can treat them as a moment to breathe and think. When someone asks you a question, it is perfectly fine to pause for a second and then respond calmly. For example, if someone asks, "What do you usually do on weekends?" you might pause briefly and then answer, "On weekends, I usually relax, read a book, and spend time practicing English." This calm response feels more natural than rushing. Now try a practice moment. Write a short answer to the question, "What do you usually do in the evening?" After writing it, read the sentence slowly aloud, allowing a small pause before speaking. Notice how the pause gives your brain time to organize the sentence smoothly. Another useful step is learning to ask simple questions in English during conversations. Asking questions keeps communication active and shows interest in the other person. For example, if someone says, "I'm planning a trip next month," you might respond with a question like, "Where are you planning to go?" Or, "How long will you stay there?" These questions encourage conversation to continue naturally. Let's try a small exercise. Imagine someone tells you, "I started learning a new skill recently." Write one question you could ask them. Perhaps you write, "What skill are you learning?" Or, "Why did you decide to learn it?" This practice prepares your brain for real, interactive conversations. Another step that supports fluency is building confidence when repeating useful expressions. Some learners worry that repeating phrases may sound unnatural, but repetition is actually a powerful learning tool. Each time you repeat a phrase, your brain strengthens its memory of that pattern. For example, all phrases like, "That sounds interesting," "I understand," or "That's a good idea," are used frequently in everyday communication. Practicing these phrases helps you respond naturally during conversations. Take a moment now and write one sentence using the phrase "that sounds." For example, "That sounds like a great plan," or "That sounds very helpful." Reading the sentence out loud allows your brain to experience the rhythm of natural speech. Another valuable habit for improving fluency is imagining small conversation situations. Visualization helps your brain rehearse communication before it actually happens. Imagine you meet someone new and they ask, "What are you studying these days?" You might respond, "I'm focusing on improving my English fluency through daily practice." By imagining these situations, you prepare yourself mentally for real conversations. Now try writing your own answer to that question. What are you studying these days? Keep your answer simple and honest. When you read it aloud, imagine you are speaking to a real person. Practicing these small conversational moments trains your brain to respond more naturally when real interactions occur. Fluency grows stronger every time you connect English with real thoughts, real actions, word, and real communication situations. So continue practicing calmly. Allow yourself to speak slowly, write thoughtfully, and repeat useful confidence. Another step toward clarity. And another step toward comfortable English communication. Your progress may feel gradual, but with consistent practice, your fluency will continue growing stronger day by day. Stay patient, stay curious, and keep practicing with confidence, because every moment you spend interacting with English brings you closer to speaking naturally and comfortably. As your fluency continues to grow, it becomes important to understand something very encouraging about language learning. Your brain learns best through repetition and familiarity. The more often you see, hear, and use certain expressions, the more comfortable they become. Eventually, those expressions begin to appear naturally in your thoughts and speech without much effort. Many learners believe fluency requires learning thousands of complicated words, but in reality, a large part of daily communication is built from simple and familiar phrases. When you become comfortable using these common expressions, conversations begin to feel smoother and more natural. One helpful step toward fluency is learning to describe routines in English. Routines are powerful practice material because they happen every day. When you talk about daily routines, you practice the same useful structures repeatedly, which helps your brain remember them easily. For example, I imagine explaining your morning routine to someone. You might say, I usually wake up early in the morning. Then I make a cup of coffee. After that, I spend some time practicing English. These sentences are simple, but they reflect real life and help you practice natural English patterns. Now pause for a small writing exercise. Think about your morning routine. Write 3 sentences describing what you normally do after waking up. Perhaps you write, I check my messages. Then I prepare breakfast. And later I study English for a short time. When you read your sentences slowly, notice how the ideas flow one after another. Practicing routines helps your brain organize time-related expressions such as usually, after that, and then. These small words make conversations clearer and easier to follow. Another useful step toward fluency is learning to describe progress. Language learners often talk about improvement and learning experiences. When you practice describing progress, you gain confidence discussing your language journey. For example, you might say, I have been practicing English regularly, or my listening skills are improving slowly. These sentences show how you can explain development over time. Let's try a short reflection exercise. Write 2 sentences describing how your English has improved recently. You might write, I can understand spoken English more easily now. Or, I feel more confident forming longer sentences. Reading your reflection aloud helps reinforce your sense of progress. Another helpful habit is learning to compare situations. Comparisons allow you to explain differences between past and present experiences. This is a very common part of everyday conversation. For example, you might say, learning English feels easier now than it did last year, or I practice more often now than before. These comparison sentences help you express change and growth. Take a moment now and write one sentence comparing your English skills today with your skills in the past. For example, I speak more confidently now than I did a few months ago. This type of reflection helps your brain connect language with personal experience. Another important step toward fluency is developing listening awareness. Listening carefully to natural speech helps you understand how words connect and flow together. When people speak naturally, they often join words smoothly. For example, instead of clearly separating every word, a speaker might say something like, "I'm going to practice later," where the words flow together naturally. By listening regularly to spoken English, your brain becomes familiar with this rhythm. Over time, you begin to recognize phrases quickly without needing to analyze every individual word. Now try a small listening imagination exercise. Imagine you hear someone say, "Let me think about it." What does this expression mean? It usually means the person needs a little time to consider something before answering. Write a sentence using this phrase. Perhaps. Let me think about it before I decide. Practicing expressions like this prepares you for real conversations. Another step that strengthens fluency is practicing short explanations. Explaining something clearly requires your brain to organize ideas logically. For example, imagine someone asks you, "How do you practice English every day?" You might answer, "I practice by listening to lessons, writing sentences, and repeating useful phrases." This explanation feels natural and informative. Now pause and write your own explanation answering that question. How do you practice English every day? Try writing 2 or 3 sentences describing your routine. When you read your answer aloud, imagine you are explaining your habits to a friend. Another helpful fluency habit is learning to express small reactions during conversations. These reactions show engagement and help conversations feel natural and friendly. For example, when someone shares good news, you might respond, "That's wonderful," or "I'm glad to hear that." When someone explains something interesting, you might say, "That's interesting," or "I didn't know that before." These short responses make conversations feel more interactive. Let's practice a reaction exercise. Imagine a friend tells you, "I finally reached my goal after months of practice." Write a short response, perhaps something like, "That's fantastic. You must feel proud." When you read the sentence slowly, notice how it sounds like a natural conversational reaction. Another step toward fluency is learning to speak about future goals. Talking about goals is common in everyday conversations and helps you express motivation and plans. For example, you might say, "My goal is to speak English confidently," or "I want to improve my pronunciation this year." These sentences help communicate personal ambitions. Take a moment and write 2 sentences about your English learning goals. For example, "I want to speak English comfortably with people from different countries," or "My goal is to understand English conversations more easily." When you read your goals aloud, they feel more real and motivating. Another valuable habit for improving fluency is learning to organize ideas into short explanations. When you speak clearly and logically, listeners understand you more easily. For example, Imagine explaining why daily practice matters. You might say, daily practice helps the brain remember new words and patterns. When we practice regularly, our confidence grows and speaking becomes easier. This explanation flows naturally from one idea to the next. Now try writing 2 sentences explaining why practice is important in language learning. Keep your explanation simple and clear. When you read it aloud, notice how your ideas connect smoothly. Another step that builds fluency is developing comfort with longer sentences. At first, many learners use short statements, but gradually combining ideas into longer sentences helps communication feel richer. For example, now instead of saying, "I practice English every day," you might say, "I practice English every day because it helps me improve my fluency and confidence." The second sentence provides more information and feels more natural in conversation. Try writing one longer sentence about your English practice. Start with a simple idea, then add a reason or detail. When you read the sentence aloud, notice how your thoughts flow more naturally. Another helpful habit is celebrating consistency. Fluency grows not through occasional effort, but through regular engagement with the language. Every time you listen to English, write a sentence, repeat a phrase, or reflect on your learning progress. Your brain strengthens its connection with the language. Even small practice moments, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, accumulate over time and create powerful improvement. Take a final moment in this section to write one sentence encouraging yourself. Perhaps you write, "I will keep practicing English every day," or "Step by step, my fluency is improving." When you read your encouragement aloud, it becomes a positive reminder of your commitment. Fluency is not a distant destination. It is a gradual transformation that happens through daily interaction with English. With each sentence you create, each idea you express, and each moment you listen and reflect, your ability to communicate grows stronger. So continue practicing calmly and consistently, because every small effort you make today contributes to the confident English speaker you are becoming. As your fluency journey continues, it becomes important to realize that confidence grows when English becomes connected to your personal experiences. The more you use English to describe your real thoughts, your real plans, and your real feelings, the more natural the language begins to feel in your mind. Many learners spend a lot of time memorizing vocabulary, but they rarely practice turning those words into real communication. Fluency improves when vocabulary becomes part of meaningful sentences, sentences that describe your life and the world around you. One helpful step toward fluency is learning to describe your environment in detail. When you practice observing and describing what is around you, your brain becomes more comfortable forming spontaneous sentences. For example, imagine sitting in a quiet room. You might describe it by saying, "The room is calm and quiet. There is a small desk near the window. My notebook is open and I'm writing practice sentences." These descriptions may feel simple, but they train your brain to express ideas clearly and naturally. Now pause for a small exercise. Look around the place where you are right now. Notice 3 things you can see. Perhaps a chair, a window, a lamp, or a book. Write 3 sentences describing those objects in English. For example, there is a lamp beside my desk. The window lets in soft light. My notebook is filled with English practice. When you read the sentences slowly, your brain practices connecting real images with English words. Another important step toward fluency is developing the habit of explaining simple processes. In daily conversations, people often describe how they do something. Explaining a process helps your brain organize ideas step by step. For example, imagine someone asks you, "How do you usually study English?" You might answer, "First, I listen to a short lesson. Then I write practice sentences. After that, I repeat useful phrases aloud." This explanation flows naturally because it follows a clear sequence. Let's try a small exercise together. Write 2 or 3 sentences explaining how you practice English during the day. You might write, "I listen to English while walking. Later, I write a few sentences. And before sleeping, I review what I learned." When you read your explanation aloud, notice how the ideas connect logically. Another helpful step toward fluency is learning to express curiosity. Curiosity plays an important role in conversations because it encourages questions and deeper discussion. For example, if someone tells you about an interesting experience, you might respond by saying, "That sounds interesting. How did that happen?" Or, "What was the most memorable part of that experience?" These questions help conversations continue naturally. Now try a short practice moment. Imagine a friend tells you, "I recently started learning a new language." Write one question you could ask them. Perhaps, "Which language are you learning?" Or, "What inspired you to start learning it?" Practicing questions like this prepares your brain for real, more dialogue. Another step that strengthens fluency is learning to talk about challenges in a positive way. Language learning sometimes includes moments of difficulty, but discussing these challenges in English helps you express complex ideas. For example, you might say, "Sometimes I struggle with pronunciation, but I keep practicing." Or, "Understanding fast conversations can be difficult, but I'm improving little by little." These sentences show determination and progress. Take a moment now and write one sentence about a challenge you have faced while learning English. Then add another sentence describing how you are improving. For example, "Speaking quickly is sometimes difficult for me, but practicing slowly helps me gain confidence." Reading this aloud strengthens your ability to discuss challenges openly. Another useful step toward fluency is practicing descriptive language. Descriptive words make your speech more vivid and interesting. Instead of using very simple words all the time, you can add small descriptive details. For example, instead of saying, "I had a good day," you might say, "I had a productive and satisfying day." Or instead of saying, "The place was nice," you could say, "The place felt calm and welcoming." These small details enrich communication. Now try a small writing exercise. Think about a place you enjoy visiting, perhaps a park, a cafe, or a quiet room. Write 2 sentences describing that place using descriptive words. For example, "The park is peaceful and full of green trees. The air feels fresh and relaxing." Reading your description slowly helps your brain practice expressive language. Another important habit for fluency is learning to reflect on experiences. Reflection allows you to analyze your thoughts and communicate them clearly. Imagine someone asks you, "What did you learn from practicing English today?" You might answer, "Today I learned some new expressions and practiced forming longer sentences." This reflection helps your brain organize knowledge into meaningful communication. Now pause and write 2 sentences reflecting on something you practiced recently in English. Perhaps, "I practiced listening carefully to natural conversations. It helped me understand sentence rhythm better." Reading your reflection aloud reinforces your learning experience. Another step toward fluency is developing patience with the learning process. Language improvement often happens gradually, and recognizing this helps you remain motivated. Think about how a plant grows. It does not grow instantly, but with sunlight, water, and time, it slowly becomes stronger. Learning English follows a similar pattern. With regular exposure and practice, your fluency gradually develops. Now write 1 sentence encouraging yourself during your learning journey. For example, "Every day I practice English, all my skills become stronger." When you read your sentence aloud, it becomes a reminder of your progress. Another helpful habit is practicing short conversational responses. These responses are the small pieces that keep communication flowing smoothly. For example, phrases like, "That makes sense," "I understand what you mean," or "That's a helpful idea," appear frequently in everyday discussions. Practicing these responses helps you participate confidently in conversations. Take a moment now and write 1 sentence using the phrase, "That makes sense." Perhaps, "That makes sense because practice helps improve fluency." Reading your sentence aloud allows you to feel the rhythm of natural conversation. Another step toward fluency is visualizing successful communication. Visualization means imagining yourself speaking English confidently in different situations. Imagine introducing yourself to someone new. You might say, "Hello, my name is Julia. I'm currently focusing on improving my English fluency through daily practice." By imagining this situation, you mentally prepare your brain for real interactions. Now try writing 2 sentences introducing yourself in English. Imagine you are meeting someone who is also interested in learning languages. When you read your introduction aloud, visualize the conversation happening naturally. Visualization exercises build confidence because your brain experiences the situation before it actually occurs. Fluency grows through many small moments of expression. Moments when you observe your environment, explain your thoughts, ask questions, and reflect on your experiences. Every sentence you write, every phrase you repeat, and every idea you express helps your brain become more comfortable with English communication. So continue practicing calmly. Speak slowly when necessary, and allow yourself to experiment with the language. Your progress may feel gradual, but every day your understanding becomes deeper and your confidence becomes stronger. Stay patient. Stay curious and keep moving forward step by step because your fluency is developing with every moment you spend interacting with English. As your fluency continues to develop, Another powerful step is learning to speak about everyday situations in a relaxed and natural way. Conversations in real life are often about very ordinary things. What we did today, what we plan to do tomorrow, or how we feel about something simple. When you become comfortable discussing these everyday topics, English begins to feel like a normal part of your life. Many learners think they must talk about complicated topics to sound fluent, but in reality, as fluent speakers often use simple language to express clear ideas. The secret is not complexity. The secret is comfort and consistency. One helpful step toward fluency is practicing how to describe your day in sequence. This means explaining events in the order they happened. Doing this helps your brain organize thoughts and speak more smoothly. For example, imagine describing your day to a friend. You might say, "This morning I woke up early and prepared breakfast. Then I spent some time studying English. Later in the afternoon, I worked on my tasks and listened to some music." Notice how the events move naturally from morning to afternoon. Now take a short pause and try a small exercise. Think about something you did earlier today. Write 3 sentences describing it step by step. For example, first I checked my messages. Then I prepared some notes. After that, I practiced English for a while. When you read these sentences slowly, your brain learns how to organize time and actions clearly. Another helpful step toward fluency is learning to express gratitude and appreciation. In real conversations, people often express thanks when something positive happens. Practicing these expressions allows you to sound more natural and friendly. For example, you might say, "I'm grateful for the opportunity to practice English," or "I really appreciate the time you spent helping me learn." These expressions show warmth and politeness in communication. Now try a small practice moment. Write 1 sentence expressing gratitude for something related to your English learning journey. Perhaps you write, "I'm thankful for the resources that help me practice English every day." When you read your sentence aloud, it helps your brain connect language with positive emotions. Another step that strengthens fluency is learning to describe problems and solutions. Conversations often involve discussing challenges and explaining how we solve them. For example, you might say, "Sometimes I forget new words, so I review them regularly." Or, "Speaking quickly can be difficult, so I practice speaking slowly." These sentences show both the challenge and the solution. Let's try an exercise together. Write 2 sentences describing a small challenge you have faced in learning English and how you are working to solve it. For example, "Understanding fast speech can be hard for me, so I listen to slower lessons and repeat them." Reading this aloud helps you practice explaining ideas clearly. Another useful step toward fluency is practicing how to express agreement in conversations. Agreement phrases are used often when discussing ideas with others. For example, you might say, "I agree with that idea," or "That's exactly what I think." These phrases help show understanding and connection during discussions. Now try writing 1 sentence using the phrase "I agree." For example, "I agree that daily practice is important for fluency." When you read the sentence slowly, notice how it sounds like a natural conversational response. Another important step toward fluency is learning to talk about experiences from the past. Many conversations involve sharing memories or describing events that already happened. For example, you might say, "Last week I practiced English with a friend," or "Yesterday I learned a new expression." These past experiences help create interesting conversations. Take a moment now and write 2 sentences describing something you did yesterday. For example, "Yesterday, I listened to an English lesson and practiced repeating sentences. It helped me understand pronunciation better." When you read these sentences aloud, all your brain practices using past time expressions naturally. Another helpful habit is learning to describe small successes. Recognizing success builds confidence and encourages continued practice. For example, you might say, "Today I understood a conversation without translating," or "I spoke a full sentence without hesitation." These small victories are important signs of progress. Now write 1 sentence describing a small success you experienced in learning English. Perhaps you write, "Today I spoke more confidently during practice." When you read your sentence slowly, it reminds you of your improvement. Another step toward fluency is practicing how to invite conversation. Invitations encourage interaction and make communication more engaging. For example, you might ask someone, "What do you think about that?" Or, "How do you usually practice English?" These questions invite others to share their ideas. Now try a short practice moment. Write 1 question you could ask someone about their language learning experience. For example, "What helps you stay motivated while learning English?" Reading the question aloud prepares your brain for interactive conversations. Another powerful fluency habit is developing the ability to explain simple ideas clearly. Clarity is more important than using difficult vocabulary. When your message is clear, communication becomes effective. For example, imagine explaining why practice is important. You might say, "Practice helps the brain remember new patterns. The more we repeat sentences, the more natural they feel." This explanation uses simple language but communicates a clear idea. Take a moment now and write 2 sentences explaining why you believe practice is important for language learning. When you read your explanation slowly, notice how your ideas connect naturally. Another helpful step toward fluency is learning to describe hopes and dreams. Talking about hopes gives conversations a positive and forward-looking tone. For example, you might say, "I hope to speak English confidently in the future," or "I hope to travel and communicate with people from different cultures." These sentences express optimism and motivation. Now try writing 1 sentence beginning with "I hope," describing something you wish to achieve through English learning. For example, "I hope my English will help me connect with people around the world." Reading your sentence aloud strengthens your motivation. Another important habit is practicing calm, breathing before speaking. Sometimes learners feel nervous during conversations. Taking a small breath before speaking helps your mind relax and organize your thoughts. When you pause for a moment and breathe calmly, your brain has time to prepare the sentence. This makes your speech clearer and more confident. Try a small speaking exercise now. Look at one of the sentences you wrote earlier. Take a slow breath, then read the sentence out loud calmly. Notice how the words flow more smoothly when you feel relaxed. Fluency grows stronger when language becomes connected to your thoughts, experiences, and emotions. Every time you describe your day, share a memory, express gratitude, or explain an idea, your brain practices real communication. These small moments of expression are the foundation of confident speaking, so continue practicing patiently. Allow your sentences to grow naturally. And remember that every word you speak or write helps strengthen your connection with English. Your fluency is developing step by step. And with consistent practice, those steps will lead you to comfortable and confident communication. Stay relaxed, stay curious, and keep moving forward in your English journey. As your fluency continues to grow, another very helpful step is learning to observe conversations and understand how people naturally exchange ideas. Real conversations are not always perfectly structured. People pause, think, change their sentences. And sometimes repeat ideas. Understanding this can help you feel more relaxed when speaking English. Many learners imagine that fluent speakers always produce perfect sentences instantly. But in reality, even native speakers sometimes pause and adjust their words. The important thing is communication, expressing ideas clearly and naturally, not speaking perfectly every time. One powerful step toward fluency is learning to talk about everyday observations. Observations are simple things you notice during the day. The weather, your surroundings, or what people are doing around you. Practicing these observations helps your brain turn thoughts into English sentences naturally. For example, you might say something like, "The weather feels cooler today. There are clouds in the sky. It might rain later." These sentences describe small observations, but they help train your brain to speak about real situations. Now take a short pause and try a practice exercise. Look around your environment and notice 2 or 3 small details. Maybe the light in the room, the sound outside, or an object near you. Write 2 sentences describing those details in English. For example, "The room is quiet and peaceful. I can hear a distant sound of traffic outside." Reading these sentences slowly helps your brain connect observation with language. Another helpful step toward fluency is learning to express curiosity about the world. Curious questions make conversations interesting and encourage deeper communication. For example, you might ask someone, "What inspired you to start learning English?" Or, "What helps you stay motivated while studying?" Questions like these show interest and keep conversations active. Let's practice a small exercise together. Imagine you meet someone who is also learning English. Write one question you might ask them about their learning experience. For example, "How long have you been studying English?" When you read the question aloud, imagine asking it during a friendly conversation. Another step that improves fluency is learning to describe emotions clearly. Emotions are an important part of human communication. When you can express how you feel, conversations become more meaningful and personal. For example, you might say, I feel excited when I understand a new English phrase. Or, I feel proud when I speak confidently. These emotional expressions help connect language with personal experiences. Now pause for a moment and write one sentence describing how you feel when you make progress in English. Perhaps you write, I feel happy when I notice my improvement. Reading your sentence slowly allows your brain to connect language with emotion. Another powerful habit is learning to talk about learning, neuro strategies. Discussing how you learn helps reinforce your practice methods and builds awareness of your progress. For example, you might say, I improve my English by listening carefully and repeating phrases. Or, writing short sentences helps me remember vocabulary. These explanations help clarify your learning approach. Take a moment now and write 2 sentences describing one strategy that helps you improve your English. For example, listening to calm lessons helps me understand pronunciation better. Repeating sentences helps me build confidence. Reading these sentences aloud strengthens your learning mindset. Another helpful step toward fluency is learning to explain ideas in simple words. Sometimes learners feel pressure to use advanced vocabulary, but clear communication often comes from simple language used effectively. For example, if someone asks why practice is important, you might say, practice helps the brain remember patterns. When we repeat sentences often, how they become easier to say. This explanation is simple, but very clear. Now try writing 2 sentences explaining why you believe regular practice helps language learning. Keep the sentences simple and clear. When you read them aloud, notice how the ideas connect smoothly. Another step toward fluency is learning to express encouragement. Encouraging words are common in conversations when people support each other. For example, you might say, keep practicing and you will improve, or you are making good progress. These phrases create positive and supportive communication. Let's practice a small exercise. Write one encouraging sentence you might say to another English learner. For example, don't worry about mistakes. Practice will make you stronger. Reading this sentence aloud helps your brain experience the rhythm of supportive language. Another useful step is learning to talk about habits. Habits describe things we do regularly, and they appear often in everyday conversations. For example, you might say, I usually review my English notes before sleeping, or I often listen to English while walking. These habit descriptions help explain daily routines. Take a moment and write 2 sentences describing your English learning habits. For example, I try to practice speaking every day. I also write small paragraphs to improve my expression. Reading these sentences slowly helps your brain connect habits with language. Another helpful habit for fluency is learning to reflect on or improvements over time. Reflection allows you to see how far you have come in your learning journey. For example, you might say, at first speaking English felt difficult, but now it feels easier. Or, my listening skills have improved since I started practicing daily. These reflections show growth and progress. Now pause and write one sentence describing how your English has improved over time. Perhaps you write, I can understand conversations more easily than before. Reading your reflection aloud reinforces your sense of progress. Another step toward fluency is practicing calm communication. Speaking calmly helps you choose words more carefully and express ideas clearly. When you speak calmly, your sentences become smoother and your confidence grows. There is no need to rush. Fluency develops through clarity. Born, not speed. Try a small speaking moment now. Look at one of the sentences you wrote earlier. Take a slow breath, then read the sentence aloud calmly. Notice how the rhythm of the words becomes smoother when you speak gently. Another important step toward fluency is learning to imagine conversations before they happen. Visualization prepares your brain for real communication situations. For example, imagine someone asking you, "How is your English learning going?" You might respond, "My learning is going well. I practice every day and I feel more confident now." Imagining this interaction helps your brain prepare natural responses. Now try writing 2 sentences answering that question. How is your English learning going? When you read your answer aloud, imagine speaking to a real person. Visualization exercises strengthen confidence because your brain rehearses communication before it actually occurs. Fluency develops through many small moments of expression, describing observations, asking questions, expressing emotions, and sharing ideas. Each sentence you write or speak strengthens the connection between your thoughts and the English language. So continue practicing patiently. Allow your ideas to flow slowly and naturally, and remember that every moment you interact with English helps build stronger fluency. Your journey toward confident communication is already happening step by step, and every small practice moment brings you closer to speaking comfortably and naturally. Stay calm, stay curious, and keep practicing with determination. As your fluency continues to develop, it becomes helpful to understand that confidence in English often grows through repetition of familiar communication patterns. When your brain becomes familiar with certain expressions, it begins to produce them automatically. This automatic response is one of the key signs that fluency is improving. Many daily conversations follow similar patterns. People greet each other, ask simple questions, share small updates, and respond with short reactions. Practicing these patterns regularly helps your brain prepare for real interactions. For example, imagine meeting someone and they ask you a simple question like, "How has your day been so far?" A natural response might be, "My day has been quite productive. I spent some time studying and organizing my plans." These responses do not need complicated vocabulary. They only need clear and comfortable expression. Now take a short pause and try a small exercise. Write 2 sentences describing how your day has been today. Perhaps you write, "My day has been calm and focused. I spent time practicing English and reviewing new phrases." When you read the sentences slowly, notice how they sound like natural conversation responses. Another helpful step toward fluency is learning to express interest in what other people say. Conversations become smoother when both people show curiosity and attention. For example, if someone says, "I recently started reading more books in English," you might respond, "That sounds interesting. What kind of books do you enjoy?" This response both reacts to the idea and asks a follow-up question. Let's practice a short exercise together. Imagine a friend tells you, "I've been practicing English every morning." Write one sentence responding to this statement. Perhaps, "That's a great habit. Morning practice can really help." Reading your response slowly helps train your brain to participate actively in conversations. Another step that strengthens fluency is learning to express opinions clearly. Experiences. When you practice giving opinions, conversations become richer and more meaningful. For example, you might say, "I believe consistency is the most important part of language learning." Or, "In my opinion, a listening practice helps improve pronunciation." These sentences allow you to express personal viewpoints naturally. Now pause for a moment and write 2 sentences expressing your opinion about learning English. For example, "I think practicing every day makes a big difference. It helps the brain remember new patterns." Reading these sentences aloud strengthens your ability to share ideas confidently. Another powerful step toward fluency is learning to explain experiences in more detail. Instead of giving very short answers, you can expand your responses by adding small explanations. For example, imagine someone asks, "Why do you enjoy learning English?" Instead of answering only, "Because it's interesting," you might say, "I enjoy learning English because it allows me to understand people from different cultures and access more information." This expanded answer provides more depth and clarity. Now try a small exercise. Write 2 sentences explaining why learning English is important to you. Perhaps, "Learning English helps me communicate with people around the world. It also allows me to explore new ideas and opportunities." Reading this slowly helps your brain practice longer responses. Another helpful step toward fluency is learning to talk about moments of discovery. When learners encounter something new or surprising, they often share that discovery with others. For example, you might say, "Today I discovered a new phrase that I had never heard before." Or, "I realized that practicing slowly helps me remember sentences better." These discoveries create meaningful conversation topics. Take a moment now and write one sentence describing something new you learned recently in English. Perhaps, "I recently learned how useful repetition can be for building fluency." When you read your sentence aloud, it reinforces the learning experience. Another important step toward fluency is developing the ability to describe situations clearly. Situations are small events that happen in daily life. Explaining them helps your communication feel natural and relatable. For example, you might say, "This morning I practiced English while drinking coffee and writing notes." Or, "Yesterday I listened to a conversation and repeated the sentences." These descriptions help tell small stories in everyday language. Now, try writing 2 sentences describing a small learning moment you experienced recently. For example, "Yesterday I repeated several phrases until they felt natural. It helped me feel more confident speaking." Reading this aloud helps your brain practice narrative, communication. Another helpful habit is learning to respond thoughtfully during discussions. Thoughtful responses show that you are considering what someone said before replying. For example, You might say, "That's an interesting point. I hadn't thought about it that way before." Or, "I understand what you mean. That idea makes sense." These responses help conversations feel respectful and engaging. Now write one sentence responding thoughtfully to the idea. Daily practice improves fluency. Perhaps, "That idea makes sense because repetition helps the brain remember patterns." Reading the sentence slowly helps you practice reflective communication. Another step that supports fluency is learning to describe goals and plans clearly. Goals give direction to your learning journey and often become topics of conversation. For example, you might say, "My goal is to speak English comfortably during real conversations," or "I plan to practice speaking for a few minutes every day." These sentences communicate intention and motivation. Take a moment now and write 2 sentences describing your English learning goals. For example, "I want to understand conversations more easily. I also want to express my ideas clearly." Reading these sentences aloud helps reinforce your motivation. Another valuable habit for improving fluency is learning to reflect on progress. Reflection allows you to see improvement and recognize how far you have come. For example, you might say, "A few months ago, I felt nervous speaking English, but now I feel more comfortable forming sentences." These reflections show growth and build confidence. Now, write one sentence reflecting on your progress in English. Perhaps, "I feel more confident expressing my thoughts than before." Reading your reflection slowly strengthens your awareness of improvement. Another step toward fluency is learning to keep conversations moving forward. Sometimes when learners finish a sentence, they feel unsure what to say next. But continuing the conversation often requires only a simple follow-up idea. For example, after describing your study routine, you might add, "And I've noticed that repeating sentences really helps." Or, "It's a small habit, but it makes a big difference." These additions keep communication flowing naturally. Now try writing one sentence adding extra detail to something you already wrote earlier. Perhaps you extend your description of your study routine or your goals. When you read the extended sentence aloud, notice how it makes the idea feel more complete. Fluency grows stronger through these small expansions, expressing ideas, responding thoughtfully, describing experiences, and sharing goals. Each sentence you create strengthens the connection between your thoughts and the English language. With patience and daily practice, these connections become faster and more natural, and gradually your confidence in communication continues to grow. So continue practicing calmly. Allow your sentences to expand naturally, and remember that every moment you spend expressing ideas in English helps your fluency develop further. Step by step, sentence by sentence, your ability to communicate is becoming stronger and clearer. Stay patient, stay motivated, and keep practicing with confidence. As your fluency continues to grow, another important step is learning how to keep your thoughts flowing when you speak English. Many learners feel comfortable forming one sentence, but after that sentence, they are not sure how to continue. Developing the ability to extend your ideas naturally is one of the skills that transforms simple speaking into fluent communication. Fluent speakers often expand their thoughts by adding small details, examples, or explanations. Instead of stopping after one idea, they gently build another idea connected to the first one. This creates a smooth rhythm in conversation. For example, I imagine someone asks you, "How do you usually practice English?" A simple answer might be, "I practice every day." But a more fluent response could be, "I practice every day by listening to short lessons and repeating useful phrases. It helps me remember expressions and feel more confident when speaking." Notice how the second response continues the idea and adds more meaning. Now pause for a moment and try a small exercise. Write one sentence about how you practice English. Then add another sentence explaining why that practice helps you. For example, "I listen to English conversations every day. It helps my brain understand natural sentence flow." Reading both sentences slowly helps your brain practice extending ideas naturally. Another helpful step toward fluency is learning to describe changes over time. Conversations often include explanations about how something has improved or developed. For example, you might say, "At the beginning, I felt nervous speaking English, but over time, I became more comfortable." Or, "When I started learning English, understanding conversations was difficult, but now it feels easier." These sentences help describe progress and growth. Let's try a practice moment together. Write 2 sentences describing how your English learning experience has changed since you began studying. Perhaps you write, "When I first started learning English, forming sentences felt difficult. Now I can express my ideas more easily." Reading these sentences aloud helps reinforce your sense of progress. Another powerful step toward fluency is learning to explain your thoughts clearly during conversations. Sometimes we want to share an idea, but we are unsure how to organize it. Practicing explanation helps your brain structure ideas logically. For example, imagine explaining why patience is important in language learning. You might say, "Patience is important because learning a language takes time. When we practice regularly and remain patient, improvement happens naturally." This explanation connects 2 ideas smoothly. Now pause and write 2 sentences explaining why patience is important when learning English. Keep your explanation simple and natural. When you read the sentences slowly, notice how your ideas flow together. Another step that strengthens fluency is learning to talk about motivation. Motivation is something people often discuss when learning new skills. For example, now you might say, "My motivation comes from wanting to communicate with people around the world," or "Seeing small improvements motivates me to keep practicing." These sentences show the reasons behind your effort. Take a moment now and write 2 sentences describing what motivates you to continue learning English. For example, "I feel motivated when I understand new phrases. It encourages me to practice more." Reading your sentences aloud helps connect language with personal purpose. Another helpful habit is learning to respond thoughtfully when someone shares advice. Conversations often include suggestions or recommendations. For example, if someone says, "Practicing every day will help you improve," you might respond, That's good advice. Consistency really makes a difference. This type of response shows understanding and engagement. Now try a small practice moment. Imagine someone tells you, listening carefully is the best way to improve comprehension. Write one sentence responding to this idea. Perhaps. That advice makes sense because listening trains the brain to recognize patterns. Reading your response slowly helps you practice conversational reactions. Another step toward fluency is learning to express encouragement toward yourself and others. Encouraging language creates a positive atmosphere and helps maintain motivation. For example, you might say, "Keep practicing and you will see improvement." Or, "Every small step brings you closer to your goal." These expressions are often used to support and inspire people. Take a moment now and write one encouraging sentence you could say to yourself during your learning journey. Perhaps, "I will continue practicing because progress comes with time." When you read the sentence aloud, or it reinforces your determination. Another powerful step toward fluency is learning to reflect on learning strategies. Reflecting on what works helps you understand how your brain learns best. For example, you might say, "Repeating sentences helps me remember patterns more easily." Or, "Writing short paragraphs helps me organize my thoughts." These reflections help strengthen your learning process. Now pause and write 2 sentences describing a strategy that has helped you improve your English. For example, "Listening to calm lessons helps me understand pronunciation. Repeating phrases helps me build confidence." Reading these sentences aloud reinforces the habit of reflective learning. Another helpful step toward fluency is learning to describe plans clearly. Plans are common conversation topics because people often talk about what they will do next. For example, you might say, "Later today, I plan to review some English vocabulary." Or, "Tomorrow, I will practice speaking with a friend." These simple future expressions allow you to communicate intentions naturally. Take a moment now and write 2 sentences describing your plan for practicing English tomorrow. Perhaps, "Tomorrow I will listen to a lesson and write new sentences. I will also repeat useful phrases aloud." Reading your plans slowly helps your brain rehearse future communication. Another important step toward fluency is developing the ability to connect ideas smoothly. Words like "because," "so," and "therefore" help connect thoughts and create logical flow. For example, you might say, "I practice speaking every day because repetition builds confidence." Or, "Listening is helpful. So I include it in my daily routine." These connectors help your sentences feel more natural. Now try writing one sentence using the word "because" to explain your English practice habit. For example, "I write sentences every day because it helps me organize my thoughts." Reading the sentence aloud helps your brain practice linking ideas clearly. Another helpful habit is learning to recognize how far you have come in your learning journey. Sometimes progress feels slow, but when you reflect on your experience, you may notice how much has changed. For example, you might realize that you understand more conversations now than before, or that forming sentences feels easier than it did in the past. Take a moment now and write one sentence describing something that feels easier for you in English today. Perhaps, Speaking simple sentences feels more natural now. Reading this reflection reminds you that improvement is happening. Fluency develops through continuous interaction with the language, through explaining ideas, extending thoughts, reflecting on progress, and expressing motivation. Every sentence you create strengthens the pathway between your thoughts and English expression. With patience and consistent practice, these pathways become faster and more natural, allowing you to communicate with increasing confidence. So continue practicing calmly. Allow your ideas to expand naturally. And remember that every small effort contributes to your fluency. Step by step, day by day, your English communication skills are becoming stronger. Stay patient, stay focused, and keep moving forward with confidence. As your fluency continues to strengthen, it becomes important to recognize that communication is not only about speaking, it is also about thinking clearly in English. When your mind begins forming ideas directly in English, conversations become smoother and more natural. Many learners notice that they sometimes translate ideas from their native language before speaking. This is completely normal in the beginning. But with regular practice, your brain gradually learns to create ideas directly in English without translation. One helpful step toward this kind of fluency is learning to observe your thoughts during the day and gently turn them into English sentences. For example, if you are planning something, you might think, I should finish my work before the evening. Or, later today, I want to practice English for a few minutes. These simple thoughts help your brain practice forming natural English ideas. Now pause for a short exercise. Think about one thing you plan to do later today. Write 2 sentences about that plan in English. For example, later today, I will review the notes I wrote during practice. I want to repeat the sentences so they become easier to say. When you read the sentences, now slowly, your brain begins to feel more comfortable thinking in English. Another step toward fluency is learning to speak about personal experiences in a calm and detailed way. When you describe real experiences, your brain connects language with memory, which makes communication feel more natural. For example, imagine telling someone about a recent learning moment. You might say, yesterday I practiced English for a while and repeated several sentences. After repeating them a few times, the expressions began to feel more natural. This explanation shares both the experience and the result. Now try a small writing exercise. Write 2 sentences describing something you practiced recently in English. Perhaps you write, I listened to a short conversation and repeated the phrases. It helped me understand the rhythm of the language. Reading these sentences aloud helps your brain strengthen that learning experience. Another important step toward fluency is learning to share small reflections about learning. Reflection allows you to explain what you notice about your progress. For example, Dira, you might say, I've noticed that practicing slowly helps me remember phrases better. Or, I realize that listening carefully improves my pronunciation. These reflections help you express awareness and understanding. Take a moment now and write 1 sentence beginning with the phrase, I've noticed, describing something you have discovered while learning English. For example, I've noticed that repetition helps me speak more confidently. Reading this sentence slowly helps your brain practice. Shakir, reflective communication. Another helpful habit is learning to explain what helps you stay motivated. Motivation is something learners often talk about with each other. For example, you might say, "What keeps me motivated is seeing small improvements every week," or "Knowing that I can communicate better in the future motivates me to keep practicing." These sentences explain the emotional side of learning. Now pause and write 2 sentences explaining what motivates you to continue learning English. For example, I feel motivated when I understand new expressions. It reminds me that my effort is working. Reading your sentences aloud strengthens your connection to your JELS learning goals. Another step toward fluency is practicing how to describe learning habits clearly. When you explain your habits, you practice organizing ideas logically. For example, you might say, "Every morning I review a few sentences and repeat them aloud. Then I write a short paragraph to practice expressing ideas." This explanation describes a routine in a clear and natural way. Now try writing 2 sentences describing one of your English learning habits. For example, I usually listen to English before I start my work. It helps me focus on the rhythm of the language. Reading your sentences slowly helps reinforce your practice routine. Another useful step toward fluency is learning to discuss challenges calmly and constructively. Challenges are part of every learning process, and discussing them helps you express complex ideas. For example, you might say, "Sometimes I feel unsure about my pronunciation, but repeating sentences helps me improve." Or, "Understanding fast speech can be difficult, but listening regularly makes it easier." These sentences show determination and progress. Take a moment now and write 1 sentence describing a challenge you have faced while learning English. Then write another sentence describing how you are working to improve. For example, remembering new vocabulary can be challenging, so I review my notes regularly. Reading these sentences aloud helps your brain practice problem-solving language. Another important step toward fluency is learning to talk about inspiration. Inspiration often comes from experiences that encourage you to continue learning. For example, you might say, "Hearing fluent English speakers inspires me to keep practicing," or "Seeing my improvement motivates me to study more." These expressions show how inspiration influences learning. Now pause and write 1 sentence describing something that inspires you to improve your English. Perhaps, "Watching English conversations inspires me to practice speaking." Reading your sentence aloud strengthens your sense of purpose. Another helpful habit is learning to describe your learning. Environment. Your environment can influence how you practice and focus. For example, you might say, "I like practicing English in a quiet place because it helps me concentrate." Or, "Studying near a window makes the atmosphere calm and comfortable." These sentences show how environment affects learning. Take a moment now and write 2 sentences describing the place where you usually practice English. For example, "My study area is quiet and organized. It helps me focus on learning." Reading these sentences slowly helps your brain connect environment with language. Another step that supports fluency is learning to summarize your learning experience. Summarizing allows you to explain an idea briefly and clearly. For example, you might say, practicing every day helps me build confidence and understand English better. This sentence summarizes an important idea about learning. Now try writing one sentence, summarizing what helps you improve your English the most. Perhaps, regular listening and speaking practice help me improve my fluency. Reading your sentence aloud strengthens your ability to express clear ideas. Another powerful step toward fluency is recognizing that communication does not need to be perfect to and be effective. What matters most is sharing ideas clearly and confidently. Even if your sentences are simple, they can still communicate meaningful thoughts. With practice, those sentences will gradually become more detailed and expressive. Take a moment now to write one sentence, reminding yourself that progress takes time. For example, I will keep practicing because fluency grows step by step. Reading this sentence aloud helps build patience and confidence. Fluency is not created in a single moment. It grows through consistent interaction with the language, through describing experiences, reflecting on progress, and expressing ideas naturally. Every sentence you speak or write strengthens your ability to communicate. And as you continue practicing, you will notice that English begins to feel less like a subject you study and more like a language you use. Stay calm, stay patient, and continue practicing with confidence. Your fluency is developing little by little with every moment you spend interacting with English. As you reach this stage in your fluency journey, it becomes helpful to take a moment and reflect on how these small habits gradually transform the way you use English. Fluency does not appear suddenly. It develops slowly as your brain becomes familiar with expressing thoughts, describing experiences, and reacting naturally during communication. Throughout this lesson, you have practiced describing your day, explaining your habits, expressing opinions, and reflecting on your progress. Each of these activities strengthens the connection between your thoughts and the English language. And the more often you repeat these patterns, the more automatic they become. One of the most important final steps toward fluency is developing trust in your ability to communicate. Many learners hesitate because they worry about mistakes, but communication is not about perfection. It is about expressing meaning clearly and confidently. When you allow yourself to speak and write freely, even with small imperfections, your brain learns faster. Every attempt to communicate teaches you something new, and gradually those attempts become smoother and more accurate. Now pause for a short reflection exercise. Think about something you have improved in your English recently. Perhaps your listening skills, your pronunciation, or your ability to form longer sentences. Write 2 sentences describing that improvement. For example, I can understand spoken English more easily than before. Practicing regularly has helped my confidence grow. Reading this reflection aloud reminds you that progress is already happening. Another powerful step toward fluency is learning to celebrate small achievements. Many learners wait for a big moment of success before feeling proud, but true progress is built from many small victories. For example, understanding a sentence you could not understand before. speaking a phrase without hesitation, or remembering a new expression during conversation. These are all meaningful achievements. Take a moment now and write one sentence describing a small success you experienced while practicing English. Perhaps you write, "Today I repeated several sentences until they felt natural." When you read this sentence slowly, and it becomes a reminder that your effort is producing results. Another important habit is maintaining consistency. Fluency grows when practice becomes part of your daily routine. Even a few minutes of focused interaction with English can make a difference over time. For example, you might spend a few minutes each morning repeating phrases. Then later in the day, write a few sentences describing your experiences. These small moments accumulate and gradually strengthen your ability to communicate. Now pause and write 2 sentences describing how you plan to continue practicing English in the future. For example, I will continue listening to English every day. I will also write short paragraphs to express my ideas. Reading your sentences aloud helps reinforce your commitment. Another valuable step toward fluency is sharing your learning journey with others. When you talk about your progress with friends or fellow learners, you practice communication while also encouraging each other. For example, you might say, "I've been practicing English regularly and I feel more comfortable speaking now." Or, "Daily practice has helped me understand conversations better." These statements allow you to share your experience openly. Take a moment now and write 2 sentences describing your English learning journey so far. For example, "At first, learning English felt difficult, but with practice, I have become more confident." Reading your sentences slowly helps strengthen your sense of achievement. Another helpful habit is imagining future conversations where you use English comfortably. Visualization prepares your brain for real communication situations. For example, imagine meeting someone from another country and having a friendly conversation. You might introduce yourself, ask questions, and share ideas. When you imagine these moments, your brain rehearses communication before it actually happens. Now try writing 2 sentences imagining a future moment when you use English confidently. Perhaps, "One day I will speak English comfortably with people from different cultures. I will share my ideas and understand their experiences." Reading these sentences aloud builds positive expectation. Another step that supports fluency is continuing to expand your curiosity. Curiosity encourages you to explore new expressions, ideas, and conversations. The more curious you remain, the more opportunities you create to interact with the language. For example, you might become curious about how certain phrases are used, or how speakers express emotions during conversations. This curiosity leads to deeper understanding and stronger communication skills. Take a moment now and write 1 sentence describing something you would like to learn next in your English journey. For example, "I would like to improve my ability to understand fast conversations." Reading your sentence aloud helps focus your learning direction. Another important reminder is that fluency is not a final destination. It is a continuous process of growth. Even advanced speakers continue learning new expressions and improving their communication skills. What matters most is maintaining the habit of interacting with English regularly, listening carefully, speaking calmly, writing thoughtfully, and reflecting on your progress. Now pause for a final exercise. Write 2 sentences encouraging yourself to continue practicing English. For example, I will continue learning because every day brings improvement. Step by step, my fluency will become stronger. Reading these sentences aloud creates a positive conclusion to your practice session. As you finish this lesson, remember that the path to fluency is built from many small steps. Describing your day, asking questions, expressing thoughts, and reflecting on experiences. Every time you interact with English, you strengthen your ability to communicate. With patience, curiosity, and daily practice, the language gradually becomes part of your thinking and expression. And over time, you will notice that speaking English no longer feels like a challenge. Instead, it feels like a natural way to share your ideas with the world. So continue your journey with confidence. Keep practicing calmly. And remember that your fluency grows a little more every time you use the language. Stay motivated, stay curious, and keep moving forward in your English learning adventure. Another helpful step for strengthening your English fluency is learning to stay present with the language during ordinary moments. Many learners only practice English when they sit down to study, but real fluency grows when English becomes part of the small spaces of your day. The quiet minutes when you are thinking, observing, or reflecting. For example, imagine you are walking somewhere, perhaps going to work, school, or simply taking a short walk outside. Instead of letting your thoughts stay silent, you can quietly describe the moment in English. You might think, the air feels fresh today. The street is busy. People are walking quickly. These thoughts may seem simple, but they help your brain connect language with real experience. Now pause for a small exercise. Think about where you are right now. Write 2 sentences describing this moment in English. For example, I am sitting quietly and focusing on learning. I am writing sentences that help me improve my fluency. Reading these sentences slowly strengthens the connection between your thoughts and the language. Another step toward fluency is becoming comfortable with repeating ideas in different ways. At real conversations, people often explain the same thought again using slightly different words. This helps listeners understand the idea more clearly. For example, you might say, practicing every day helps me improve. In other words, a regular practice makes learning easier. These 2 sentences express the same idea, but in slightly different ways. Practicing this skill makes your communication clearer and more flexible. Try a small practice moment now. Write 1 sentence about your English practice. Then write another sentence explaining the same idea using different words. For example, I repeat sentences every day. This daily repetition helps me remember expressions more easily. Reading both sentences aloud helps your brain learn to express ideas in multiple ways. Another helpful step is learning to describe learning moments as they happen. When you notice something new during practice, expressing it immediately strengthens your memory. For example, you might say, I just learned a useful phrase. It helps me explain my ideas more clearly. Or, I noticed that speaking slowly improves my pronunciation. These small observations turn learning into active communication. Take a moment now and write one sentence beginning with the phrase, I just realized, describing something you have discovered about learning English. For example, I just realized that repetition helps me speak more confidently. Reading this sentence aloud reinforces that Shazhou discovery. Another valuable step toward fluency is becoming comfortable sharing simple explanations with others. Sometimes learners feel they must use advanced vocabulary to sound fluent, but real fluency comes from clarity, not complexity. For example, imagine someone asks you how language learning works. You might say, language learning improves when we listen carefully, repeat useful phrases, and practice regularly. This explanation is simple but effective. Now pause and write 2 sentences explaining how someone can improve their English fluency. For example, practicing every day helps the brain remember patterns. Listening and speaking regularly make communication easier. Reading your sentences slowly helps your brain practice clear explanation. Another important step toward fluency is developing patience with your speaking rhythm. Some learners worry when they pause or slow and down while speaking, but natural conversations include pauses. These pauses allow the brain to organize thoughts before expressing them. When you pause calmly and continue speaking, your sentences often become clearer, and listeners can follow your ideas more easily. Try a short speaking exercise now. Look at one of the sentences you wrote earlier. Take a slow breath, then read the sentence aloud calmly. Notice how the words flow more smoothly when you allow yourself a small pause before speaking. Another helpful habit is learning to connect language with your goals and dreams. When English becomes connected to something meaningful in your life, a motivation grows stronger. For example, you might say, learning English helps me connect with people from different cultures. Or, fluency allows me to share my ideas with a wider audience. These sentences connect language with purpose. Now write 2 sentences describing what English fluency could help you achieve in the future. For example, fluent English will allow me to communicate confidently with others. It will open new opportunities for learning and growth. Reading these sentences slowly helps your brain connect language, with aspiration. Another step toward fluency is recognizing that communication improves through continuous practice rather than perfection. Every time you write a sentence, repeat a phrase, or describe an experience, your brain strengthens its ability to express ideas. Even if a sentence is simple, it still builds your communication skills. With time and repetition, those simple sentences gradually become longer, clearer, and more expressive. Take a moment now and write one sentence describing how consistent practice helps you improve. For example, each day of practice makes English feel more natural. Reading this sentence aloud reminds you of the power of consistency. Another valuable habit is learning to stay curious about the language. Curiosity encourages exploration, and exploration leads to deeper understanding. You might notice new expressions while listening to conversations, or discover different ways to describe the same idea. Each discovery adds another piece to your understanding of English. Now pause and write one sentence beginning with the phrase, I want to learn, describing something you would like to improve in English. For example, I want to learn how to express my ideas more clearly. Reading your sentence aloud helps focus your learning direction. Another step toward fluency is learning to appreciate the journey of improvement. Language learning is not only about reaching a goal. One, it is also about enjoying the process of discovery, practice, and growth. Every time you interact with English, you expand your ability to understand and communicate. Take a moment now and write one final sentence encouraging yourself to continue practicing. Perhaps you write, step by step, my English fluency is growing. When you read this sentence slowly, it becomes a reminder of your progress and commitment. Fluency develops through many small moments of expression, moments when you describe your surroundings, reflect on your thoughts, and share your experiences in English. Each sentence you create strengthens the connection between your ideas and the language. With patience, curiosity, and regular practice, English gradually becomes a natural part of how you think and communicate. And as this process continues, you will find that expressing your thoughts in English feels easier, clearer, and more comfortable with every passing day. Thank you so much for spending this time practicing English with me today. I truly hope this lesson helped you feel more comfortable, more confident, and more motivated on your English learning journey. Remember, improving your English fluency is not about being perfect. It is about practicing consistently, expressing your ideas, and allowing your brain to grow familiar with the language little by little. Every sentence you speak, every phrase you repeat, and every moment you spend thinking in English is helping you move forward. Even if progress sometimes feels slow, trust the process, because fluency develops step by step through patience and daily interaction with the language. Small habits like listening carefully, writing short sentences, and repeating useful expressions can create powerful improvement over time. So keep practicing, stay curious, and continue giving yourself opportunities to use English in real situations. The more you interact with the language, the more natural it will begin to feel. If you enjoyed practicing English with me today, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you never miss our next lesson. We share new English learning content regularly to help you keep improving your listening, speaking, and fluency step by step. And most importantly, keep believing in your progress. Because every day you practice, your confidence grows stronger and your English becomes clearer. Thank you again for learning with me today. And I'll see you in the next lesson.